York City Council trying to get to the bottom of why now 19 people died out in the cold over the last couple of weeks as the city was gripped by freezing weather. New York City Social Service Commissioner Molly Wausau Park answering the tough questions there. And she's no longer in the Mamdani administration, but the questions of how the city handled the long stretch of bitter and brutal cold weather remain. And now here to talk about all those things and more, the chair of the City Council's General Welfare Committee who held the hearing, Councilwoman Crystal Hudson. So great to have you here.
Thank you for having me again.
Let's talk about what exactly you learned from that hearing. You were on the Pixel Morning News the day of the hearing prior about how you thought more could have been done in the prior days, weeks before the brutal cold came in. Once you heard the testimony from the city officials, did you feel like you got the answers you needed?
I think to an extent, yeah. I mean, a lot of the issues we saw were seemingly systemic, ongoing, long-standing issues that we know have been occurring for a very long time. Mm-hmm. The concern that I had specifically was that we knew that the cold weather was coming. We knew that we were going to experience freezing cold temperatures after that first snowfall. And so some of the precautions that were taken after that really should have been taken in advance of that. The administration has done a lot, though, in the days leading up to that hearing, and even since, to expand the number of stabilization and safe haven beds, and to ensure that we're getting people off the streets into housing, and also reducing the wait time when people call 311 to be connected to a live.
But the idea of getting the word out early, before the cold, did you get an answer to why that didn't happen? Yes, there was a ramp up once there was already an issue.
I think what we learned was happening were sort of the business as usual, right? And so the administration puts out advance warning and information and trainings about code blue weather starting, back in November when the cold weather starts. But we just, I think, should have seen a bit more ramp up in the immediate days leading up to. But of course, nobody can predict the future, right? And so you can't necessarily anticipate as many deaths as we've seen.
Yeah, the biggest point of contention seems to be the involuntary removals. And a lot of New Yorkers I talked to are saying, why can't they just involuntarily remove people, put them where they belong in the meantime to keep them safe? In fact, Speaker Menon said the administration should have removed more people, but there is this process that needs to be followed in terms of getting people off the street and kind of honoring people's rights at the same time.
That's right.
It's a delicate balance. So was that part of the testimony? Was that part of the questioning?
It was, and it is a very delicate balance. You have to recognize and acknowledge the humanity of people that are living on the street, and also look out for their best interest and keep them safe, warm, and healthy. There is a process for involuntary removals. The Department of Homeless Services may do them. The NYPD ultimately has final jurisdiction over who's removed involuntarily from the street. There are a lot of things that go into play, including clinical assessments. And so we need to make sure that we're always honoring, people's wishes while also keeping them safe. And it's a hard balance to strike, as you mentioned.
Were encampments brought up, and whether or not the encampments, because Mayor Mamdani had been kind of criticized for not wanting to sweep homeless encampments. In fact, the former mayor, Adams, was saying that was a big mistake. Did that come up during the hearing? It
did come up briefly, and particularly from experts in the field in public testimony who shared, traumatizing experiences from people who've been, swept up in those encampments, people whose items and personal belongings have been thrown into sanitation trucks.
Yeah.
And so, again, we have to honor people's humanity. There are many reasons why people choose to live on the streets. Yeah. And as Commissioner Park mentioned during the hearing, we've already erred if we've gotten to the point where they've missed out many opportunities to be housed and then make a choice to live on the street.
Certainly lessons learned for the next cold spell, the next storm. The other big issue that City Council is working on right now is the budget deficit. The mayor came on right here on Pix 11, talked about a $12 billion deficit weeks later, this week in Albany, saying, well, it's actually $7 billion. What is you as the council, because you guys are going to have to take a hard look at these numbers. Were you surprised to see that kind of reduce so quickly?
Not really. The city council always anticipates, these types of fluctuations in the numbers. We're looking forward to seeing the mayor's preliminary budget report, and then we will in turn submit ours in the weeks following. And then we'll go through our hearings and see, what more we can gather from the administration.
So you guys believe the money was there?
We do.
Yeah. Because people, to go from $12 billion to $7 billion, that's not a few dollars.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the money is always sort of there. That's not to say that we don't experience real deficits.
Yeah.
But usually they're smaller than is to believed at the beginning of the process. But this is also part of the budgetary process, right? Looking at the numbers, making assessments, seeing what revenue returns we're getting throughout the year. The budget numbers change throughout the year.
Yeah.
And so, we'll see where things go from here.
Do you think there'll be cuts?
I don't know yet.
Yeah.
We'll have to see.
I also want to talk about, while we're talking about budget and homelessness, the mayor reversing course on his support for expanding the city voucher program, something that he really campaigned on. You expressed some disappointment on X, and one reason that he says was the cost. So what are your thoughts on kind of this reversal, and what's the impact?
It's always more cost effective to keep people housed than to keep them in shelter. And so the city council passed a package of legislation that would expand eligibility for city VEPS vouchers. The previous mayor vetoed that legislation. We then overrode the veto. He then sued. We appealed the decision. We've gone in this back and forth for a long time. My hope was that the court case would be removed or pulled back, and then we can actually move forward with implementing the city law that the city council has passed. I understand that there are budget considerations, but again, in the long term, it's much cheaper to keep people in their homes and to provide an opportunity for them to find housing than to further exacerbate our shelter system.
Yeah, did you talk to the mayor about this?
I haven't spoken with him directly.
Yeah, I mean, it is a reversal because he was very outspoken about it. Do you anticipate that there will be some kind of back and forth and give and take on major issues that maybe he campaigned on, and now that he's mayor, the reality sets in?
Well, I think that, the reality for any mayor is that you don't know what you're, inheriting, so to speak. And so once he was able to get inside and dig into everything, I'm sure there were some surprises. And so then, you have to take an honest look at what promises you've made and what commitments you may have made and what the reality is of actually being able to fulfill some of those. My hope, again, is that we can get to a place where we are expanding the city VEPS eligibility and also implementing the city law that the city council has passed.
I only have a few seconds left with you, but I want to touch upon the Stonewall. You're one of the first openly gay black women in the council, and obviously there was the removal of the pride flag from the Trump administration down at Stonewall. Is there action that council can take? I know that they're putting the flag back up overall in the city. Is there action that council can take because it's federal land technically?
There isn't direct action. I mean, other than, supporting a resolution, which we did yesterday. We passed in the city council, and that we moved very quickly on that. And so I commend the speaker for moving that forward. But this is also Black History Month. And I always say Black history is queer history is Black history. And we have to make sure that none of our history is erased.